glad to be back here once again. It feels like I was just here, but I am not complaining about that. I'm also grateful for the opportunity to speak before you once again. If you would, turn over to 2 Peter chapter 1. That's the base text for this week. 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 5 through 7. And I'll be reading from the ESV version for the sermon. Starting there in verse 5. For this very reason, make every effort to supplement your faith with virtue, and virtue with knowledge, and knowledge with self-control, and self-control with steadfastness, and steadfastness with godliness, and godliness with brotherly affection, and brotherly affection with love. We commonly refer to this as the Christian graces, but we're reminded to supplement our faith with virtue, knowledge, self-control, steadfastness, godliness, brotherly affection, and love. And among these, I think, not just because I'm talking about the topic, but I think that temperance or self-control is kind of the unsung hero within our faith. Because there's many reasons that it is the most practical application in our day-to-day lives that we can see and explain to others and something that they can relate to very easily. But all throughout the Bible, we see plenty of examples of people who have had great self-control. For instance, Joseph exhibited remarkable self-control. Turn to Genesis chapter 39. Genesis 39, verses 6 through 12. Starting there in verse 6. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and because of him, he had no concern about anything but the food he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance, and after a time, his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house. He has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her, to lie beside her, or to be with her. But one day, when he went into the house to do his work, none of the men of the house were there in the house, she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left the garment in her hand and fled out of the house. We see here that not only did he just refuse the advances of Potiphar's wife, but he did it over and over and over again, showing self-control. I know many people might turn down the first time, but after they keep getting asked again and again and again, whether it be for adultery or to go out to the bar after work with friends and coworkers, asking repeatedly over and over again, it will kind of start to chip away at our faith and our resolve. But Joseph did not do that. Jesus himself showed unparalleled self-control during his temptation in the wilderness. Turn to Matthew chapter 4. Matthew chapter 4. I know that if I had to go 40 days without eating food, I would be very, very hungry. Especially coming out in high school, whenever I'm just graduated high school, but whenever I was in high school and playing sports, I would eat food like nobody else's business. I would just constantly eat food in, and I don't know where it went because I'm still this skinny. But Matthew chapter 4, starting in verse 1. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And after fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. And the tempter came to him and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread." But he answered, "It is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." Then the devil took him to the holy city and set him on the pinnacle of the temple and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and on their hands they will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against a stone." Jesus said to him, "Again, it is written, you shall not put the Lord your God to the test." And again, the devil took him to a very high mountain, showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. And he said to him, "All these I will give you if you will fall down and worship me." Then Jesus said to him, "Begone, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve." Then the devil left him, and behold, angels came and were ministering to him. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, and we're probably very familiar with this subject. But Jesus shows that no matter how many different ways that Satan can come at him, he has the self-control to resist him. And even though Satan tried to pervert the word of God and turn it around on Jesus to get him to succumb to his will or temptation, we see that Jesus was grounded in his faith. He was grounded in the scriptures. And even though sometimes in us, in like our lives, we might go out and we might see people who are saying, well, look what this verse says. This verse says that you can go out with us. You don't have to drink, but you can go to that bar with us. It'll be fine. But we have to be grounded in our faith. Paul also mentions having self-control in a worldly sense in 1 Corinthians 9:25. It says there, everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. He talks about everyone who is successful in the games, or I think it's the Olympics at the time. I'm not sure exactly what the games were. But everyone who is successful in that, it goes into training and discipline and self-control, and then parallels that to our faith and how our temperance or our self-control is for a much better reward than what those people are doing. Think about the professional athletes and how much money they make. I don't know if you know Cristiano Ronaldo. He's a famous soccer player, one of the highest paid in the world. And he just made $260 million in the year of 2024. That is a lot of money to just kick a ball around. I mean, I'm sure he's not complaining about it, but sometimes we think that, well, I want good things in my life. I'm determined in my faith to not let that be a stumbling block to me. Why shouldn't I want the best here as long as I'm not prideful of being better than those around me? But there are many different reasons for this. Temperance is crucial because it protects us from the dangers of excess. Without self-control, we can easily fall into harmful habits or behaviors that will draw us away from God's purpose for us. Whether it's overindulgence in food, uncontrolled anger, unchecked desires, or a lack of temperance, that it can lead to spiritual, emotional, and physical consequences. Proverbs 25:28 says, like a city whose walls are broken through is a person who lacks self-control. Back in those times, if a city wall went down, that was their strongest defense. And while they might still be able to repel the attack, it was a lot harder to do so, and then just pure chaos reigned in the city as enemy soldiers are flooding into their city and they have to get them all out. The same thing can happen to our faith. If we just have a breakdown in our wall of self-control even once, it can lead to a lot of chaos in our lives that we have to be mindful of. But I also wanted to take this in the direction of practical application and what it means for us in our day-to-day living. First thing I want to talk about is the physical consequences if we have a lack of temperance. Overindulgence in food and drink can lead to health issues such as obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and liver problems. The body can only handle so much, and excess consumption can strain its systems, and it can lead to long-term damage. Lack of moderation in physical activities or sleep patterns can also have adverse effects for us. Overexertion without proper rest can result in burnout, injuries, and weakened immune function. And then, excessive stress and workload without proper breaks can lead to mental health issues like anxiety, depression, and burnout. The mind needs to balance to function optimally. Overindulgence in entertainment, such as excessive screen time, gaming, can lead to a sedentary lifestyle, social isolation, and decreased productivity. That one's probably the worst one for me. I'm a music composition major, and so I spend many hours every week just sitting in front of a computer, just writing music and figuring things out. And so it is tough for me to sometimes to balance that with the other aspects of my life. But then there's also spiritual consequences as well. When our desires and impulses take precedence over our spiritual growth, we risk drifting away from our relationship with God. Excess can become that idol that distracts us from our faith and our purpose. And then this drift can lead to a weakened relationship with God, as well as a lack of spiritual direction. Think of Solomon, right? He was looking to be one of the most promising kings in Israel's history, starting out walking very closely with God. God came to him and said, I'll give you anything you want, whether it be riches, land, a long lifespan. And Solomon said, I want to be able to walk with you. I want the wisdom to do what you want me to do. And so God gave him everything else as well. But we see it throughout Solomon's life. He slowly drifted away from God. And it could be from having a lush and extravagant lifestyle that would generally do more harm for him than good. But I don't think that Solomon asked God for the wisdom to do what he wanted him to do with the intention of doing away with God entirely later on in his life. He probably was very devoted, and he was very honest when he told God, I want to walk with you. I want to do what you want me to do. But we can see that excess slowly led him away in different things and different reasons that he got distracted by from the world, led him away from his walk with God. I mean, for example, I don't know, but if I was Solomon, right, and I had the opportunity to get anything I wanted, but I knew that I didn't want God later on in my life, why would I ask to be with God right then? I would have just tried to get whatever I wanted in a worldly sense and then said, you know what, God, thank you, now bye-bye, and just leave him at that. But Solomon just slowly drifted away, probably without even realizing it for the most part. He probably just had this little one thing here, this one thing there, without even realizing it, and then those things just turned to a snowball effect, and off he went, drifting away from God. And that's something that we should be careful of as well. If we as Christians just don't even notice whenever we lack self-control, then we can just slowly build up that snowball effect, and then we'll drift farther and farther away from God. But we have the church family here, who our responsibility is to see the other person just slowly drifting away, and then rope them back in and explain to them where their lack of self-control is and help them to get better and overcome that. But excessive focus on personal desires can strain our relationships with family, friends, and as well as the community itself. When we prioritize our wants over the needs of others, we risk creating tension and distance in our relationships. Overindulgence in material possessions or status can lead to envy, pride, a lack of empathy, and further damaging our connections with others. Additionally, excess trust can lead us to engage in relationships that aren't the best for us. Think of Samson. He was a man who was blessed with inhuman strength, whose task was to remove the Philistines and deliver Israel. However, his relationships were constantly leading him away from God. The most notable is Delilah, who he trusted too much. Delilah revealed his secret because of an excess amount of trust, and she eventually used that to bring his downfall. Self-control is very crucial in our relationships, and using a clear mind that we're able to make informed and responsible decisions. This happens a lot, especially with the younger generation that I see around in my peers, is that they kind of just dive headfirst into whatever relationship they're in, and then they find themselves way worse because of it. I'm not saying we shouldn't trust other people, because we are to trust other people, but we're supposed to have a clear-minded trust to where we make rational and sensical decisions that we see that most people don't make, unfortunately. But not only that, not only do we have health consequences, emotional and mental turmoil, strained relationships, but excess can also lead to financial instability. Excessive spending and materialism can lead to financial difficulties, debt, and create a lack of resources for essential needs and future goals. This instability can create a stress limit in our ability to support ourselves and others. The first thing I think of when I think of this is that if we spend all of our money to go buy this one thing that we really want, but we have much better things to be spending it on. For example, I'm going to college. I'm racking up student debt, student loans. I have to pay them back eventually. But as soon as I graduate, I just move to wherever and I say, you know what, I really want a really nice car. I could spend this $45,000 just to get all of my student loans gone, but why would I do that when this car looks plenty nice? And then I would just go and do that, and then I'd find myself having even more to pay from the car payments, and then not only that, but I'm also missing out on the money I had before. Same thing can happen with like physical consequences. If we overspend on fast food or whatever, then that will affect our health, but also affect our financial situation as well. If we go out to eat every single day whenever we can't really afford to go out to eat every single day, just to go out with our coworkers or our friends just because they want us to, then we aren't being responsible with our money. If we go out and spend all this money and then we come back on the first day of the week and say, oh, well, you know what, God? I don't have anything to contribute because I spent it all just going to, I don't know, a nice dinner with my friends. That's not very good and practical financial stability. And so there's some ways to combat this excess. The first one is to set clear limits and establish boundaries. If we do this in various aspects of our life, such as diet, screen time, work hours, and spending habits, it helps maintain balance and prevent overindulgence. For example, if I'm thinking about going out to eat, right? And I say, you know what, I really want Chinese. That sounds really good. This is not something I would ever say because I don't like Chinese food. But if I really wanted Chinese one night, then that's perfectly fine. It's all about a spectrum. I know my percussion professor down WVU is all about spectrums from one end to the other. On one end, we have being overly stingy with our money where we can't live, we can't help other people, and we don't even spend money more than we absolutely have to. And on the other end, we spend money faster than we get it, and we just rack up debt and whatever. So what we should find a balance on that spectrum depending on our situation where we can afford to go out and get Chinese one night a week or once every other week. But if I go home and I say, all right, well, now Pizza Hut sounds good, now Subway sounds good, now a steakhouse sounds really good, and this keeps adding up over and over again, then we aren't setting those limits. Another thing we can do is to create an attitude of gratitude, say that 5 times fast, by regularly reflecting on the blessings of what God has given us in our life. One of the best ways to counteract wanting more and desiring to have this, and this is to just think about what God has done for us, what God has given us in our life already, that we can sit and appreciate what he has done for us and the things that we have. Another thing we can do is seek accountability. If we surround ourselves with the church members here, it encourages us to have moderation and balance within our lives, and then people will also rope ourselves back in if we start drifting away. I remember one of the seminar things that I had to take for college, they suggested the idea of accountability partners, where you and one of your buddies have to buddy up and provide guidance, encouragement, and then gentle reminders when we have too much work time or too much screen time or something like that. And I don't really like that idea just because I don't feel like dealing with all that nonsense. But the same principle should apply with us within the church. If we see another member of the church just drifting away, or maybe not even necessarily drifting away, but not living the life to the best that they can, we should be able to give them gentle reminders about, hey, maybe do this because of this, and this reason. We shouldn't go at them and say, well, I'm doing this right and you're doing this wrong, and I'm working out, I'm not in debt, and you are, so obviously I'm better. That's not the way we should be going about it. Instead, we should just gently, with love, go and encourage those people. And then something else is to prioritize self-care. If we take care of our physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being, we can engage in activities that promote our health, relaxation, and spiritual growth, ensuring that we maintain a balanced and fulfilling life. I always tell people it's common sense that if we live with moderation and we live the way that God tells us to in the Bible, our bodies are naturally going to be far healthier than if we didn't. If we don't go out to McDonald's every single day for lunch, breakfast, and dinner, and just keep eating fast food always, and then we're shocked that we have diabetes or something like that, well, no wonder you have diabetes, because you aren't living in a way that could promote your health. Now, obviously, there are certain extensions to this, like, for example, cancer. If I was stuck with cancer, and it's not something that I didn't go into a radioactive pool of water or something like that, and I ended up with a cancer or a tumor in my body. Obviously, that's not something I can control. And even if I do live a healthy life and I balance my diet and I exercise, I might not be immune to physical things, because physical health is one of the main ways we will be tempted throughout our life, because that's the easiest one to affect us. We might say, well, you know what? It is what it is, so I'm going to die anyway, so why am I not going to take care of my body? But all of these things are interconnected with each other. If I take care of my body, I have a lot more energy to go out to talk to others. I have a lot more confidence in my ability to have the energy to go out and preach to other people. I can engage within the congregation a lot more. I can serve and teach classes. I can do all these things, but I can't do that if I am bedridden because of my poor decisions throughout my life. And so temperance is not an isolated virtue, as I just mentioned, but it's intricately connected with faith, virtue, knowledge, steadfastness, and godliness. And then I'll read 2 Peter 1, 5, and 6 again. For this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith goodness, and to goodness knowledge, and to knowledge self-control, and to self-control perseverance, and to perseverance godliness. This passage highlights that these things are interconnected. These Christian values, these values of faith that we have, are kind of like the snowball effect of us drifting away from God. If we slowly start building these things up, the momentum gets easier and easier as we go along. It's always the hardest part whenever you first start out. If we have to make all these drastic changes at once, that'll be very hard. But 10 years down the line, after we already make these tough decisions and we start building our faith up, we start supplementing that with all these different values and virtues, then it'll be much easier for us later on. And so, by exercising self-control or temperance, not only do we build a strong foundation for spiritual growth and maturity, but we also create space for the Holy Spirit to work within us. And that will help us refine our character. Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 and 23, temperance is listed as one of the fruits of the Spirit. And so when we practice self-control, we allow the Holy Spirit to shape our character. We just did a Galatians class in our college class down in Morgantown. And we noticed that it's bookended by walking with the Spirit and walking with the Spirit. Meaning that we can't have these virtues and these fruit of the Spirit without walking with the Spirit itself. These two things are interconnected, that we can't just neglect one and have the other. Similarly, it's the fruit of the Spirit, not fruits of the Spirit, meaning I can't just pick and choose which one, but everything is interconnected. If I don't have love, how am I going to be meek and gentle to someone around me? And if I'm not meek and gentle, how am I displaying my love to others? And it's all interconnected like that. And then self-control also helps us to persevere in our faith, even when we face trials and challenges. James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4 says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. And by exercising self-control, we can endure trials with patience and with steadfastness, growing in our faith and spiritual maturity." And so a life marked by self-control will reflect the character of Christ, and it serves as an example to others around us. And so we can embody the character of Christ, and our actions and choices become a testament of our faith, serving as an example to others. Matthew chapter 5, verse 16, many of us are familiar with it. It says, "Let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." And our self-control can inspire others to seek God and follow his ways. Temperance also leads to a life of peace, joy, and fulfillment. Romans 8:6 says, "The mind governed by the flesh is death, but the mind governed by the Spirit is life and peace." So when we're practicing self-control and align our desires with God's will, we experience true peace, joy, and fulfillment. I know a lot of people, at least down in Morgantown, those I encounter, are always wondering why. I'm in the Creative Arts College, which naturally happens to be a very liberal extension, and I don't want to say democratic because I don't feel like bringing politics into this. But they're constantly wondering why. Why would God do this? Why would God do that? And it takes a lot of self-control not to get frustrated with them, because it's a human desire to wonder why. Remember Tony's kids, whenever I'd be hanging out at their house, every 2 seconds I get a question, why? But it's just human nature to wonder why things work, why things are the way that they are. And when I think of like natural disasters and things like that, things that people consider the act of God, they wonder why would God let this happen? And there's several reasons, but the one that primarily jumps out to me is that it shows that we are not in control. This shows that we do not have the severe power on earth. If there's a flood, I can't just tell the flood, you know what? No, stop it. I don't like that. And then it's done. We know that Jesus can do that whenever he can just stop a storm in an instant and it's just gone. But it shows that we don't have the control that a lot of people think we do, especially with like higher ups in businesses. I get lectures about how to take control of your life, you need to do this, and this. And that way no one can stop you and do what you want to do regardless of what everyone else says. But that's not the way that we see in the Bible. we should be living with self-control, not doing whatever we want to do, not taking excess of this, that, and the other, and just buying that car, buying that house whenever we want to. But we should be grounding ourselves within the Bible and looking at it and saying, what does God want me to do? What are God's values that I can incorporate within my life? And so, as I mentioned before, it can help us to become more effective in our service to God and others, and it helps us live out the call of love to our neighbors as ourselves. An example of this, I'm not going to read this, but it helps us to focus on what truly matters and allows us to serve with God and others more effectively. And I will read this. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 24 through 27. 1 Corinthians 9, 24 through 27. Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one receives the prize? So run that you may obtain it. Every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable. So I do not run aimlessly. I do not box as one beating the air, but I discipline my body and keep it under control, lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified. Paul here compares the Christian life to a race, and it emphasizes the importance of self-control and discipline. And one thing I noticed was that he says that he disciplines his body, not just in a sense of like physical temptations like lust and things like that, but I have a good feeling that Paul was actually being pretty healthy for the time. Obviously, we don't have our understanding of medicine that we have this modern day, but he was constantly just doing everything that he could to further the cause of Christ. And then, so by living a temperate life, we can better fulfill the call to love and serve our neighbors, and it makes a positive impact in our communities, and it glorifies God through our actions. And so to wrap it up, we have to remember that temperance and self-control is a gift from God. It's given to us through the Holy Spirit, and it is a virtue that requires intentional effort and reliance on God's strength. I think sometimes we get in the habit of saying, oh, that will come with time. And with certain things, with our spiritual life, things will come with time. Our understanding of the scriptures, as we delve more and more over the span of years, our knowledge will come along with time. But if we don't make the decisions that we need to make right now, and we know that we need to make them, it's not going to come with time. If we continue to neglect that, we're drifting away from God. We're building that snowball that with time will only get further away from Christ. And so we need to make an intentional effort to rely on God's strength now instead of saying, I'll get around to it later. And then if we live our life in a way that is in accordance with God's will, there's a decent chance that we will experience a life filled with joy and many blessings beyond anything else. I'm not saying that just because we need to have self-control, we can't have this nice thing. We can't be able to spoil our grandchildren with this, that, or the other toy. But we should be able to make a conscious decision of, do I need this? No. But do I have the budget for this? Do I have the time to sort it out? I'm not a finance guy. Tony is probably more of a finance guy than I am. I just go to the college and I just rack up debt right now. That's my finances. But we need to have our blessings and realize that those come from God. And so we should appreciate them. We shouldn't just throw them out the window and say, I need to have self-control. Because if God gives us certain things and he allows us to live a life with a good, healthy income, a nice house or a nice car, we should take that as a blessing from God. But as long as we keep recognizing that these blessings are from God, it helps us from seeing them as an idol for our own success or worldly wealth. And so, as we strive for self-control, we should experience the abundant blessings and live a balanced, Christ-centered life. And if you're here today and you aren't a Christian, you haven't had the Holy Spirit come upon you to give you this innate self-control. It's not, I guess I shouldn't say innate, because it's human nature for us to want things and to do things that aren't within God's will. Think of Adam and Eve in the garden. Eve saw something that she couldn't have, and so Satan went up to her and said, well, you can have it, just go get what you want. Who cares what God says? and then she obviously went and ate the fruit. And so we should be willing to make these self-control changes, but as we, excuse me, but as we live our lives, we can recognize to a greater ability of what God has done for us. We can know that God is working through us. We can have the confidence in Christ. Not only that, but we know that we are saved. That's the greatest confidence we have. I always think it's interesting that we're in Philippians right now in our college class, but Paul talks about how it is a guarantee that heaven is his home. And that's something that I think is very profound for us as well, because oftentimes we think, well, if I keep doing this and I keep doing this, I hope I make it to heaven. I hope that what I'm doing is good enough. But if we're striving with all of our hearts after God, heaven will be our home. There's no second guessing whether we've done enough, whether what we're doing is good enough. As long as we're trying and we're looking in the scriptures and saying, do I need to make any changes? And if I don't need to make changes with this, how can I teach this to others? How can I support the congregation? How can I serve God to the best of my ability? Then heaven is a 100% guarantee. Not from anything we've done, but by the grace of God, because he sent Jesus to die for us and given us this salvation, that we know that heaven is a guarantee. And that's something that I at least find very interesting with Paul, is his mentality, especially within this. Because he mentions self-control a lot, and he mentions having discipline within faith, and then immediately after that talks about heaven and how that is a guarantee. And those things obviously will go hand in hand. But as I mentioned at the beginning, I think self-control is the unsung hero of this. And so speaking of the congregation as a whole, if you're here today and you are struggling with something, you notice that something in your life is not the way that it should be. You're noticing difficulties within even just balancing your life, keeping yourself roped in, and preventing yourself from living that life of excess. The responsibility of the church here is to bear one another's burdens. We are supposed to help each other. We're supposed to wrangle the other person back in when we find them starting to slip away with brotherly love. Obviously, we shouldn't say, oh, well, you're doing this and this wrong. I noticed that. You didn't do that last week, but now you're doing it, so I guess I'm better than you now. But we should be constantly bearing one another's burdens. So if you're here today and you have any need whatsoever, we invite you to come forward as we stand and sing.